Well, firstly, Luther and the Reformation leaders, for them, going back to biblical sources was very important, and that was one of the defining features of the Reformation. In other words, they didn't just take on board what the Roman Catholic Church was currently teaching, or all the obfuscations, or the additions, or accretions to the gospel, which the Catholic Church had added over a millennium or more. But they went back to biblical sources and to the Church Fathers. Luther and Calvin quoted the early Church Fathers a lot, actually, who were the early apologists in the first few centuries after the New Testament for what authentic Christianity was. And there were two or three key areas, I think, that they recovered. The first was they tried to answer the question, how are we saved? How do we get to heaven? Now, in the Roman Catholic tradition, it's not that they hadn't heard of salvation by grace. What they had lost was the notion of salvation by grace alone. They were taught that grace was available through indulgences, through prayers through Mary, through the saints, through good works. But they'd lost the dimension of being saved by God's grace alone, without the addition of all these other things. And as Luther went back to Scripture, particularly as he's read the early chapters of Romans, he saw very clearly that we are justified, or set free, or made right with God by the grace of God ministered through the work of Jesus Christ on the cross alone. And that there was nothing as human beings that we could contribute to salvation except the outstretched hand of faith by which we receive the grace of God. The second thing that Luther rediscovered was the primacy of the Scriptures. Again, over the previous 1,000 years, the Catholic Church had built up a body of teaching in the Church, not all of which had its roots in the biblical revelation. And the essential question that Luther, Calvin, and other reformers are asking, second essential question, was, what is our primary source of authority? Or how can we know what is true? And the conclusion they came to was that we couldn't know what was true primarily from what the Catholic Church fathers and leaders had said, but our primary source of revelation and understanding about what was true about the nature of God, the nature of humankind, the nature of salvation, was to be found uniquely in the Scriptures. So as one of the reformers said, we are not innovators. We're not trying to create new doctrine. We are renovators. We're renewing or reaffirming what the early church taught. And in that sense, they were going back to the early sources.